All right. Well, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for stopping by the Pentecostal Perspective today. Today, we have a very special guest on the show. Ryan Franklin is a seasoned executive coach and consultant with over 25 years of personal development and leadership expertise in both corporate and church settings. Ryan has been dedicated to empowering Christian leaders by helping them achieve success, fostering healthier organizations, and realizing their God-given dreams. In 2021, Ryan officially launched Christian Leader Made Simple, a company that's dedicated to serving the Christian leadership community, where he has been utilizing his expertise to help many people from all walks of life. Ryan, welcome to the Pentecostal Perspective.
Hey, Robert, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's an honor and a privilege.
Well, I stumbled onto you from a really awesome resource called Fountain. If individuals have not heard of it, it's basically like YouTube for Christians. So you can set your kids down in front of it and you won't have to worry about what they will hear or see. It's just a great resource. It's got great content on it. This is an unashamed promotional for them. They didn't ask me to do that, but I just love the folks over there, Jason Staten and all the individuals that have put that together. And myself, I'm a content creator on there, and so is Ryan. He's got a lot of great content on there.
They are tremendous people, and I would have to back you up and agree with you on that.
So one of the videos that I had watched on Fountain is actually how I stumbled across some of Ryan's work, and immediately, there was this connection that I felt like needed to be made. And I'm so thankful that you took the time out of your schedule to visit with me today. Specifically, I would like to ask you about some leadership principles. And I would like to, because this is on the Pentecostal Perspective, we are going to be covering this from that perspective. But what advice do you have for pastors who are seeking to empower and develop leadership skills in their congregations?
Yeah, well, Robert, thank you for being willing to dive into this subject in a podcast such as yours, because I think oftentimes that it is definitely a neglected subject in a lot of churches. But however, it's an extremely important subject. And I would say if I were a pastor, which I am, and wanted to develop leaders, which I do, I would start with first of all looking around me, wanting and essentially just identifying some potential leaders. And there's people in your congregation that will demonstrate potential for leadership by serving. They may have a passion for different things related to serving, but also they just have a natural knack for, stepping up and taking charge and orchestrating something. Or let's just say that maybe they have an uncanny spiritual maturity about them that is just not normal. That may be a potential leader. Maybe they have relational skills that are extraordinary. That may be a potential leader. And then I wouldn't discredit somebody that is just willing to learn and grow. I think we all need to grow. And in my opinion, leadership is the process of leadership growth is really just an individual that is being discipled in a deeper way with deeper principles, maybe being challenged in a little bit greater way. And so really the first thing there would be just to identify potential leaders. I'll pause there in case you have anything you want to add or ask related to that.
Yeah. So I like something that you just said there about a lot of times I think people have that proclivity to look at people who are sort of more extroverted. And what you've just described is actually, as a pastor or as someone who's developing leadership within congregations, what you've described is not only being, aware of the obvious, but I love the fact that your heartbeat is basically making sure that you're sort of pulling that veneer off of individuals who maybe have those talents and those abilities to lead, but they've sort of buried that underneath, self-doubt or uh, maybe
Yeah.
sometimes just fear. So I really love what you're
You're
saying there.
you're exactly right. And really, um, leadership energy is much different than sociability. Sociability, you could be an introvert, extrovert, an ambivert, which is a mixture of the two. Doesn't really matter. Um, I'm a deeply introverted person. I energize by being alone. I don't prefer crowds. However, I push myself in those areas. I push myself to be in the limelight of things at times just because it's necessary as a leader. But that's not my go-to. However, even with those deeply introverted characteristics, I have a very high competitive nature. I have uh, a joy for taking charge of things. I love to take charge and orchestrate things, um, uh, and on and on and on. I've got a lot of characteristics. Leadership energy is one of my greatest strengths, but I'm deeply introverted. So I'm glad that you brought that out.
So along those same lines, like sometimes when individuals have those sort of tendencies to be more withdrawn, or maybe they do feel more comfortable by themselves, I would definitely describe myself as the last one that you just named off, where I can be sort of the social butterfly, and then I need to come back and recharge alone.
Yeah.
So when it comes to those individuals that you can see that potential that's there, that untapped potential, but yet you're not necessarily sure how to approach them, what are some effective communication modes or methods that you can use within a church leadership team that you've already developed for those individuals? Or even how do you bring those people onto a team without them feeling like maybe they're being overwhelmed?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, I think once you've identified an individual that is just maybe just a possibility of a leader in the future that you want to develop, it's all going to start with relationship. And
Mm.
you mentioned communication. Your question surrounded communication, but really, in essence, you got to communicate with those individuals. You've got to get in their world. You've got to talk to them. You've got to invite them along with you in your leadership ventures. You got to invite them to meetings. You got to, uh, spend time with their spouses or spend time with their friends, or, you know, you got to get out there and get involved in their world a little bit so that you can kind of pick up on other traits that may be coming to the surface, and will help you. It'll help you narrow down, because identifying possible leaders is one thing, but narrowing it down to people that I want to truly invest my time and energy in is a different story. Um, and I want somebody who is hungry. I want somebody who is willing to work hard. I want somebody that's going to pursue me and pursue things that I have to offer them. I'm going to reciprocate and pursue them as well. However, I want somebody who is actively seeking to be developed in leadership before I'm going to spend a significant amount of time with those individuals. We don't want to, and I hate to say it like this, but we don't want to spend our time pouring into a bucket with holes. And so I need to identify the good buckets out there. They may have holes in them, but I don't want to. I don't want a bucket that has a bunch of holes, or one big hole that is not uh, repairable. I don't mind working with somebody that is deficient in some areas. That's not a problem at all. In fact, that's my job as somebody who wants to develop people. But at the same time, I want to focus on those people who are really invested in it in themselves. And to get to your question on communication, I think it really starts, first of all, with my transparency.
Mm, I like that.
I got to keep it real with the individuals that I want to develop. And if I come across as arrogant or egotistical or a know-it-all, do you think those people are going to see through that? Absolutely. It's not going to take them long to realize that those things come from very insecure places, and they're likely not going to stick around very long. And so I want to come to, let's just take one individual that I may be targeting to invest in. I want to come to that person with a level of transparency that, hey, I'm human just like you. I make mistakes. I've got some good things, some strengths about me that I can bring to the table, but I've also got some weaknesses, and I'm going to share both of those with you and tell you how I overcome those weaknesses. And the possibility of their weaknesses being different from mine is great. But the fact that I do have weaknesses, I'm coming to the table with basically an integration of the good and the bad. And it's so important that I don't try to appear perfect. I don't try to appear better than who I am, because people see through that lack of authenticity.
Man, that's gold right there. And the first scripture that came to my mind when you were just talking about this is there's a scripture in the book of, or not Leviticus, I'm sorry, the book of Proverbs, actually, that says that a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. And I think what you've just described there is how to display that balance of letting them know, like, I'm not on a pedestal. I'm, you're not subservient to me. We're going alongside of each other. We're helping one another. And I can actually relate to that very strongly from previous interactions with people in my life, whether it be, managers or supervisors on the job, or sometimes, unfortunately, even within Christian leadership circles, where individuals, when they walk into the room, they demand attention and they demand authority and they demand. And at first, from the standpoint of a fellow Christian and a fellow worker, you give that to them. But over time, it almost like leaves a sour taste in your mouth, because that individual, you can start to see like now they're overstepping, ethical boundaries and things like that. So what you've just said is man, that is gold. And I think that applies not only to the church, I think that applies to all walks of life.
It does. And transparency builds trust. It fosters a sense of unity among a team. Transparency is when people are going to see your flaws, regardless of whether you're transparent about them or not. So if you try to hide them, if you try to put on your mask and go to work, people are going to see them anyway. But they're going to see an inauthentic person when they see you with your mask on. But if you're willing to just unmask and be yourself, it takes a sure person, a confident person, to do that, and really that fosters the sense of first of all unity, but second of all, just confidence in you as a leader from that other individual.
And I've seen this firsthand within the Freedom Alliance group that we have at our local assembly. So it's mainly for substance abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction. And we have individuals that come in, and if you've ever dealt with anyone who has a past in drug addiction, they've usually grown up faster than what they had to. They've usually been hurt numerous amounts of times in their lives by people in leadership, people in authority. And so the second that they walk into a room, the first thing they do is they scan the room. And these individuals are like highly in tune with who's fake and who's not. And I have seen time and time again where individuals will come in and try to put on airs or try to be something they're not. Or a good sort of case in point, I won't mention any names, but there was an individual who was helping with a local juvenile detention center. and he went in and he was trying so desperately to get on their level. He was a good Christian man, and he had never done any drugs. He had a minor problem with alcohol at an early age that God had gotten him through, but he was so desperate to get on their level that he began to say things that was so outside of, he mentioned actually shooting up a drug that you cannot shoot up. And immediately every one of the kids in the room was like, okay, that's a phony. That's a fake. And it destroyed his effectiveness. And
Yeah.
so what you're saying is like, yet again, it's gold, because if we can just, and and I think I say this from a personal standpoint too. Sometimes we have this, we want to protect our image, and that fear of, is our image going to be tainted? Are people going to see us differently if we display those wounds that we have from the past, or if we display our flaws and faults? I think it can
Yeah.
really hinder fostering great relationships and building on that trust that you're talking about. So, man, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I love that you brought out the fact that that guy came in and tried to play the part and people saw through it. You know, he probably feared, he likely feared um, not being able to relate to the individuals because he had never been there in his life,
Sure.
been where some of these people were at. And the reality of it is when we're working with individuals, even people that we want to develop in leadership in our churches, we're likely not going to have the same background as those individuals. Everybody is so unique and different. Just like our thumbprint is different, our past are going to be unique and different. So this is my next key principle that I feel like is really critical when you're talking about effective communication and growing leaders, is active communication.
Mm.
We have to key in to what we're hearing from these individuals. We have to listen, first of all, let them talk and hear what listen deeper than just their words, without interrupting them, without jumping to conclusions because of what we may think that we know about them. I can go and relate to a drug addict, and I do. I'm a pastor of a large organizational style church. I do a lot of pastoral counseling. I meet with all kinds of people who have gone through all kinds of things. And the reality of it is if I key in and listen to what they're telling me, that's what people desire the most. If they know that their voice matters, if they know that I'm keying into the emotion within them, if I'm actively listening to them, that really it brings them to a place of where they feel heard and they feel valued. And really, in essence, that at its core, that is what people really want. And it's amazing how it works.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about, communication, and you've already talked a little bit too about developing those leaders, or at least finding those leaders and even developing them. What I would like to sort of pick your brain about is how can a pastor, or someone like in my sense as a program director who's trying to help to mentor mentors, how can we find those meaningful mentorship opportunities with them? And, what kind of a, how effective is that in guiding that mentorship?
Yeah. All of my life, I have searched for people that may be a stage ahead of me in life, or, whatever, that has provided that mentorship for me. I hope that I'm getting your question right, but really, looking for individuals that, and I'm thinking through this on the fly. I really think that if we're seeking, if I'm answering this from the perspective of somebody seeking a mentorship, seeking somebody to mentor them, I've got to kind of know where I'm headed in life.
Mm.
If I'm a little fuzzy on what is in my future, then, you know, I'm likely going to seek the wrong mentor in my life. You know, I had such a love and a passion for leadership. I experienced executive coaching years ago. I was coached by an executive coach. I knew that after having gone through that and having a love for leadership all of my life, I knew that that was something that I desperately wanted to do. Um, Prayed about it, fasted about it, uh, you know, sought the Lord on it, and asked the Lord to really reveal somebody in my life that could help, that may be a few steps ahead of me on that, that can help sort of guide me in the right direction. And so, and the Lord provided that person. But I had to seek it out. I had to seek that relationship. I had to go to them and ask them, would you be willing to meet with me? Had to get rejected a few times and go back again and ask again, until they realized that, hey, this is the desperate person, the one that's really willing to work hard and do what's necessary to learn. This is a person. I had to show them that I wasn't a bucket of holes.
Yeah.
And when they saw that, this one particular individual that was willing to mentor me, was willing to provide his time, for me, because he saw that I was worth investing in. He saw my passion, my desire, but I knew what I wanted. If I didn't know what I wanted, then it's likely that I would seek that from the wrong person, and you know, actually even take a wrong path in my life down the road of different things, because I wasn't laser focused and clear on that. But I think to start off, and I'm willing to banter back and forth here on this subject with you, because I know I'm not fully answering your question, but I think to start off, I've got to have a little bit of a focus on where I want to head and who can get me there.
No, that's awesome. I love that you answered it from that perspective of the person who's seeking that mentorship. That's great, because I hadn't even really thought about asking that question from that perspective. So for those that are listening, this is actually going to be more beneficial, I think, for them as well. But now, like, let's shift it now from the perspective of the pastor or the leadership. How can they find, what role does mentorship play in shaping effective Christian leaders, and how can pastors or leaders find meaningful mentorship opportunities? How can they actually, identify those opportunities?
I think it goes back to the same concept of identifying potential leaders. I'm not going to invest anybody in anyone unless I see a strong work ethic, and somebody that's worth investing in. But I think the benefits of it are pretty significant. You know, for us as leaders, pastors, even just maybe a little bit older men mentoring younger men, or a little bit older women mentoring younger women. It's, that's a tremendous opportunity to give wisdom and experience that's maybe a few years down the road from them. It provides accountability. It provides support that people need. And I think more than anything, it provides the relational nutrients that an individual needs to be able to effectively grow and develop. They need that acceptance. They need validation. It's amazing how, when we do find someone that we can mentor, that's worth investing in, when we do pour our time and energy into that, it's amazing how that can validate an individual, how it can encourage them, how it can provide perspective and insight and advice to those individuals, and really shape the way that they grow and develop. However, finding those people that are worth investing in can be a challenging process. And, we talked about that a little bit at the beginning, so I won't rehash that, but really an important, I think mentorship I look at it as the same as a leader leading a group of people, or a leader wanting to develop other leaders. It's still, it's one and the same, in my opinion.
You just touched on something there. I'm going to kind of pick out from what you just
Yeah.
said. That's sort of nothing that I've sent you, so this is going to be off the cuff. But as soon as you said it, I thought this would be very much so worth diving into for just about a moment. But you've actually brought up like this ethical question that I think needs to be addressed, and that is mentorship between the sexes. So, what if, like, say, I'm a male leader in my church, and I have a female who comes up and wants mentored by me? How do I address that situation? And vice versa, a female with a male that wants to be. I've seen it happen. I've actually personally had to deal with that myself, and it's kind of a rough way to navigate. So how would you deal with a situation like that?
Now, Robert, you're stirring up something here that is that is quite challenging. You know, it's rare that I would be okay with a man mentoring a younger woman, or vice versa. It's rare that it may even be more appropriate for an older woman to mentor a younger man. That may, but in this day and age, it's quite challenging. There's got to be such heavy guardrails in those situations, and I think if that is going to happen, I don't think it could happen like you or I, for instance, couldn't do that without a spouse present. I think you've got to have heavy accountability in order to be able to do that. It's, there may be mentoring situations, but I think an ongoing relationship, you just have to be really careful of that, in my opinion. I'm not going to put myself in that place to where there is an opportunity to, to even be perceived as doing something that is not right or ethical.
No, that's a perfect answer, and it's one that I've often sort of given myself for individuals who have come to me asking if it's appropriate or not. I know within our group, I have purposely sort of brought underneath me 6 different mentors, 3 other males and 3 other females for that very reason, because I know within that sphere,
yes,
we're going to have, individuals that are trying to find sobriety that are women, and they're not going to feel comfortable, or it's just not going to be ethical. And another aspect of that is, I don't know if you've taken the Safe Church, the training that's on the UPCI website, but it is phenomenal. I would recommend that to anybody to go and take. And one of the key things that it talks about in there a lot is to make sure that anytime you are mentoring or talking with another individual privately, there should always be another person present.
Yeah. And you made a good point there, Robert, in bringing out your scenario. I think it works in group settings. If you're not meeting one-on-one with these individuals, for instance, the community that I've built for leadership development online, we meet on Zoom calls, but it's not one-on-one with a female. It's group. This morning we had a call and had about 15 people on the call, and it was a mixture of male and female. Well, I am in essence mentoring, even though there's group discussion and all involved, I'm mentoring this group of 15 people, so to speak. And I think that is very okay. We're in group settings, even in the flesh, in person, when you find yourself needing to mentor young ladies in a group setting, I think you're okay with that, especially if you have a mixture of male and female. I just draw the line with the one-on-one.
Makes total sense. It really does. And I think it's common sense, but I wanted to put it out there anyway, because I have had individuals come and question, whether that's ethical or not. And I think it's just good sometimes to hear it from another voice. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, you know, not that this would even be okay, but I would even lean more a peer, or like I said, an older person would even be okay. I think it is completely off limits for a younger person that would look to me as an authority figure in their life to be one on one with that person. That is quite challenging.
Amen to that. So we've talked a lot about now the mentorship aspect of it, and I threw you a curveball question. So thank you for acquiescing.
I like curveballs.
With that being said, I want to sort of shift this now into defining purpose and or maintaining it. So when it comes to purpose, how do you define purpose in the context of Christian leadership, and how can pastors discover that and then align with it?
Okay. First, defining it, I would say that purpose for a Christian leader is really, in essence, it's all about understanding and living out God's calling in your life. That's purpose, understanding and living out God's calling. And really, it's about knowing why you're here on earth, why you're actually leading, and who. And this is really more important: who you're leading for. It's not selfish ambition. I'm not growing a church or growing a entrepreneur business, or whatever I may be doing. I'm not doing that for my own gain. I'm doing that for ultimately it's about serving God and serving others. I want to grow others around me, but I want to serve God in the best possible way that I can. And so, that's how I would define it. But discovering and aligning with that purpose, I think it always has to start. And this is usually a given, but sometimes it's not a given. So, but it's got to start with prayer and study of the word. We're not going to understand our purpose if we don't first get the mind of God in us through prayer, and the mind of God in us through the study of the word. That is where we find our mission, is in Scripture. And so that is first and foremost. It should be a given, but Robert, it's not a given for a lot of people. And then I'm often going to look for, when I look for a person's, if I'm helping a person sort of dive into purpose in their life, I want to know what kind of past experiences they've had. If someone is going to go, for instance, work in an addiction ministry, it's probably good that they have some sort of history with addictions. And at the very least, they need an education of some sort to work in an addiction ministry. So I want to look at their past experiences, and usually that is what's going to help me begin to align to the purpose that they would have in their life. And then I also know that God gives each of us gifts. He gives us talents, some more than others. But I want to know what that is. My number one gifting in myself is my prudence, my organization, my structure, my ability to get things done and do them with excellence. My second greatest strength, and it's very close to my first, is my leadership energy. And so considering those gifts, those two gifts, now I'm introverted. There's some other areas that I struggle in. So that makes me a perfect design for a COO type position or an assistant pastor type position. It's what I'm doing right now at POA as an assistant pastor of an organizational style church is right in line with my giftings. I've discovered my purpose because I've looked at my past experiences, what I've excelled in, what I've failed in, but I've also looked at my gifts And that's super important to know when you start looking at purpose in your life. And when we align with that purpose and we discover that purpose, the reason that's so critical is because life is going to be difficult. If we're building something like a church or an organization, we're working hard towards something. It's going to take a lot of time and it's going to take a lot of energy. So I better be motivated to do it. If it doesn't align with my purpose in life, that motivation is going to quickly wane. And so I've got to figure out what that is in order to be motivated to do those hard things.
So in your view, how can pastors or even leadership navigate through challenges in leadership without losing sight of their purpose?
I think to start with, and I'm going to be redundant here, you got to stay in prayer and scripture. I think a pastor that doesn't stay grounded in their devotion to the Lord has a very good chance of losing their purpose. And again, I say that should be a given, but it's not a given. And you would think that a pastor would be very much devoted to their prayer and study of the word, but that's not always a given. A lot of times the workload of a pastor is heavy, and sometimes those things can be eluded without you even realizing it. And before you know it, you're in a bad place. And so I think staying grounded in prayer and scripture is critical, is first and foremost. I think another thing is seeking wise counsel, having mentors, as we just talked about. A pastor having a mentor and wise counsel in their life is super important, because we do not need to do this alone. An isolated pastor is not a good thing. And so it's critical that we have voices in our life that can speak into our life and give us insight. And if we're sort of stepping out of line and out of our purpose, we need people in our life that can bring us back in. And it's not just mentors, by the way. It's peers. We need peers. I recommend, in fact, one of the courses or one of the chapters in my book, The Christian Leader Blueprint, is on building a personal support team. I've also got a course in my community on it, is what I was referring to. But building a personal support team, I recommend that every individual build a support team around them of 2 to 3 people. Now, a lot of people think that they have good friends and a support team around them until you start really looking at it and determining what that really means. And I want someone in my life that I can be fully transparent with, that I can connect with on a routine basis. A lot of times people, their support team, they may see once a year at a conference or whatever. I'm not saying you got to see them in the flesh, but we live in a world of Zoom and Google Meet and different things that sort of shrinks the world a little bit. And I say you have to meet with these individuals regularly, and those individuals are going to provide things like acceptance and validation and clarification and encouragement and things that are going to keep us grounded to our purpose. That is a very important and a critical thing. And I see in my executive coaching practice, I see way too many pastors that are lonely. And I can tell you, me for one, I am on a quest to make sure that anybody I come in contact with that will allow me to impact them in any way, I'm gonna try to help them move towards having a support team in their life. That is really probably one of the most important parts of purpose. I think another big part of that is having and embracing a growth mindset. And, um, it's amazing how many people think that they have arrived. I've written a book. I've got degrees. I've got accomplishments in my life, but I'm gonna be the first to tell you, Robert, I have not arrived. There's so much more that I need to grow in, so much more that I need to learn. And if as long as I keep that mindset, I'm likely going to stay more grounded to my purpose. It's so important that we get around people that have that same growth mindset as well. When you're speaking of a support team, I want people in my life that have that growth oriented mindset as well. And then I think it's also important. We have some of these built-in communities of people around us in our churches and different places. Again, loneliness is of the enemy. It's one of the best tactics to bring a leader down, to bring a pastor down, to move a pastor away from purpose. And I think getting around a community of people, it's one of the reasons that I built the Christian Leader Community Coaching Program, is so that you could have a community of people that has a growth mindset, that is moving in the same direction, people that you can resource from and talk about things that are super important to continue moving towards that purpose in our life. And there's a ton more of stuff that we could talk about here, like self-care and celebrating victories in our life and things like that. But I'll stop there.
Well, man, that's yet again, everything that you've been saying is just, it's not only is it practical, but it's biblical. And that's what I love about it.
It's biblical. It is so biblical. God designed us, Robert, to need him. And that's where a lot of people stop. But God also designed us to need others in our life.
Yes, sir.
I was talking to a pastor just yesterday that is struggling to ask for help. They don't know how to ask for help. And God designed him, just like he designed me, to need other people in our lives to help us through things. And, we all have, every one of us have individuals in our churches that are overly needy. They come through the doors of our church and we duck out and go to the bathroom or something because we know that they're overly needy. And if you're listening to this right now and you're not agreeing with that, I would challenge your authenticity there, because we all know those people. But Robert, that's what gives neediness a bad name.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is Robert, I need individuals in my life, good, solid, trusted individuals in my life that I can resource from. You need people in your life. We all have to have individuals in our life. We need to need. Neediness is not a bad word. It's a good word. And God designed it that way. It's a big part of discipleship.
Amen. Amen. So you've talked a little bit about your community, the books that you've written, and the individuals that you personally are mentoring, which leads me to a question then. Can you share a personal experience where some purpose-driven leadership has transformed a church community, and what lessons were learned from that?
Yeah, I talk about, it was in either the first or the second chapter of my book. I give the example of G.A. Mangan. Years ago, he took on POA, this church, with just a handful of members. I think there was around 30 members. And he had one purpose, and that was to reach the lost. And he was very passionate about prayer and very passionate about soul winning. But the prayer was for the purpose of soul winning. And you couldn't deter him from that. And even years ago, 10 plus years ago, 10, 11 years ago, he passed away. But just a few years before that, prior to that, I was working as a pastoral assistant here at POA, and I would go pray in the auditorium. I still do to this day, and I would come out of the auditorium, headed to work at around 9 o'clock in the morning, and he would be headed into the auditorium to go pray. He'd spent hours in there praying, but he would say, Ryan, and I wish I could do his voice like so many people do, but I can't. But he would say, Ryan, don't look to the left, don't look to the right. Keep moving forward to what the Lord has placed before you. And that's basically what he was saying, is don't lose sight of that purpose, that purpose-driven leadership, that purpose. And his purpose-driven leadership for many years transformed this church, that transformed this community even, and began to build a phenomenal foundation that his son, Anthony Mangan, which is our bishop now, he passed it on to him. And, Bishop Anthony Mangan is just known all around the world for his passion for reaching the lost. You're not going to deter him from that. He is so focused on that. We just buried a dear friend of mine, Marshall Xavier. Some listening to this may know who he is. He was a pastor here at POA at one point, but he's done all sorts of things in his career, from starting churches to starting homeless ministries and all sorts of stuff. He was just a tremendous man of God, but he had I would not want to stand next to him in judgment. He had such a passion to reach the lost. We would go to a staff lunch, for instance, and we would be missing Brother Marshall, and we'd look around and he'd be off to the side talking to somebody at another table. And then you'd see him come to the church later and baptizing them. Or, he had such a passion and a purpose. And his passion was he was going to reach the lost. Didn't matter who they were. Didn't matter how much money they made. He would minister to the person under the bridge the same way that he would minister to the person that owned the business. He ministered to anyone, and he stayed true to that purpose, and that changes churches, that changes lives, that changes environments. When we can really get zeroed in on purpose, and that could really go for anything. I know there's 3 stories of people that their purpose is to reach the lost. But if you're working in a individual ministry, what is the purpose for that ministry? If you're working in an addiction ministry, for instance, what is your purpose in doing what you do? When we get locked in on that is a motivator that can't be deterred. And it can change lives. It can grow organizations and ministries in ways that like no other can.
That's, in the experiences that you've just shared, I think from the outside looking in at POA, you can definitely see the transformation from, like you said, that purpose-driven leadership of Brother Mangan. Let's sort of change gears now, and then we'll kind of wind it down. But I think this is an area that needs to be addressed before we end this conversation, because in leadership, like I've already stated before, you're going to come up against opposition. You're going to come up against, pitfalls. And so what are some common pitfalls or challenges that you've observed in Christian leadership, and how can they be overcome to maintain that purposeful leadership?
That is a great question, because we can't deny that there are things that derail leaders, even Pentecostal leaders, even Spirit-filled leaders. There are things at times that derail them. And I would say probably one of the most common things that I see really impact an individual is burnout and overcommitment. And talking about quest and things that I'm very passionate about, another thing that I'm very passionate about is a healthy life balance. I need to have a healthy life balance. If I am going to do significant things, hard things for many years to come, I've got to figure out how to have a good rhythm of life and a good, healthy life balance. And I would say that's probably the most common pitfall. And I like to look at, I'll just give you a quick framework for that. I like to look at healthy life balance through the lens of four things, four pillars. I call them the four pillars of healthy life balance, and that's work, rest, play, and worship. And I'm not going to have equal amounts of any one of those things, but I have to have a balance of those things in my life. Work is going to always outweigh anything else. But if I work all the time and don't rest, don't have adequate rest, I'm going to burn out. Even if I work and rest, but I don't have an element of play in my life, that's where relationships are built. That's where relationships are energized, and if I don't have that, I'm likely going to lead to some form of burnout. And then obviously worship is that thing that I called a given that is not always a given. But I've got to have a balance of that work, rest, play, and worship in my life. And when I do have a balance, it creates a rhythm. And there's times, Robert, where I'm going to get out of rhythm. There's times, you go on vacation, for instance, there's nothing rhythmic about vacation. I mean, you're going to sleep in late, go to bed late, go ride roller coaster rides all day or whatever people do on their vacations, go fishing all day. But I've got to know what to swing back to. I've got to know what gets me back into that healthy life balance again. And so that's really, I could keep going there, but I'll stop there. That is probably one of the biggest pitfalls is burnout and overcommitment. I would say a second one is a lack of vision and direction. It's a misnomer to think that every pastor has the ability to create vision. It's a misnomer to think that every individual, some listening to this may not be pastors. It's a misnomer to think that every individual has the ability to create personal vision and direction for your life. Not everybody has that ability. I work with a lot of individuals as an executive coach, and I would say probably half have high ability for vision and half don't. And it's okay as long as those individuals recognize that they don't have that ability and they compensate. And to compensate, you got to get somebody else in your life to help you generate ideas and generate a picture of what your life is moving towards, or your organization or your church is moving towards 3 to 5 years from now. If you don't have that sort of vision in your life, you don't have direction, a lot of times we're going to spend a whole lot of time running down a road and then we find out it's a dead end, or running down the road and we find out, I don't like this road. I want to be on the other road. And so vision and direction is critical, and a lack of vision is definitely a pitfall. I would say a third, and I'll stop here. There's probably more that I could give you, but I'll stop here. A third would be not being able to deal with conflict well. There's a lot of people in this world that are highly, highly compassionate, and they avoid conflict. They're sort of passive aggressive with conflict. As a leader, and many pastors are highly compassionate, they still have to deal with conflict. That's what keeps an organization moving forward. That's what keeps healthy communication happening, is being able to properly deal with conflict. On the flip side, there's individuals out there that have a heavy hand. They have a low compassion level, and they may, essentially kill people with their words or the way that they deal with conflict. And that is destructive as well. I think there has to be a balance there. We have to deal with conflict in a proper way. Scripture speaks of it in John chapter 1, verse 14, speaks of grace and truth. We've got to be able to deal with conflict with grace, with love, with care, but also with truth. And I think the quicker a leader learns to effectively deal with conflict, I would say the quicker they're going to succeed in whatever they're doing. That is a critical thing, and often a pitfall that catches people by surprise.
And and I think everything that you just said right there ultimately keeps leading back to what you prefaced almost this entire conversation off of, and that is relationship.
Yes.
Interpersonal relationship with your peers, with your leadership, with yourself, even.
Yes.
Wow. Well, man, you've really covered a lot. And I greatly appreciate your time again. Where can people find out more about you, about your services? Do you have any resources that you can point them to?
Absolutely. Everything you can find on ryanfranklin.org. But I would encourage people to, in fact, Robert, you did this earlier today. I would encourage people to go on my website. I've got a pretty powerful Christian leader self-assessment. If you're interested in knowing the things that you need to actively grow in, if you want to get laser focused on your personal growth as a leader, take this assessment and it'll tell you exactly what you need to pinpoint. From there, I've got a free Christian Leader Blueprint short guide on my website. It's a short version of a model that I've developed to help grow leaders. There's 16 items on this model, categorized into 4 different sections of establishing a better rhythm of life, seeing yourself more clearly, leveraging your strengths, and building more productive relationships. Critical aspects of leadership, and that short guide sort of unpacks them in a short form. It's about a 25-page PDF that you can download for free. And then if you really want to get serious about diving into those topics, I've got a book called The Christian Leader Blueprint as well, and that's available at PPH or Amazon or anywhere you would buy books. It's also available on Audible. A lot of people don't like to read. I love to listen to books myself. And so I did an Audible version of that and would highly recommend people doing that. And then finally, Robert, I would just mention this. If people really want to get serious about focused growth and have the tools and the community and the support to be able to move towards effective leadership in their life, I would say join my Christian Leader Community Coaching Program. It's one-on-one coaching is expensive, and it's hard to find the right coach sometimes. So I've created this Christian Leader Community Coaching. It's not very expensive. It's very much affordable for anyone. Yet you get courses for all of these things. You get forum community interaction for all of these things. We have weekly hot seat Zoom coaching where we jump on a Zoom call and we'll coach. I'll coach individuals through the barriers that they may have in their personal growth. We go through courses together as a community. We just launched one of those course accelerators today, actually. So we've got a lot of great things in that community to help an individual grow in a significant way, and it's very much affordable. So I would encourage people to go to ryanfranklin.org, and you can find free resources. If you don't want to pay for them, that's no problem. I would encourage you to go and take advantage of the free resources, but there's also leveled up resources that may cost you a little bit, but would be well worth your investment in that. So ryanfranklin.org.
And I would just say that if you are interested in growing as a leader, or even if you're not in leadership yet and you want to grow, even the free resource that I partook of today, this assessment that you take, it's 80 questions. It does take a little bit of time. It only took me about 5 to 7 minutes, I think, in total. And I love the fact that whenever you're answering the questions on there, he says, like, don't think too hard about it. Just answer, like, sort of shoot from the hip. And what's your first knee jerk reaction to this question? And I caught myself overthinking several times, and I had to stop and go back to the beginning there and realize, okay, I just need to pick something. But what I noticed was, he asked me earlier, what did you think about it? And my first reaction was, ouch. And that's a good thing, though. It helped me
That's a great
to
thing.
identify,
Yeah.
okay, here's some areas where I need to improve. And the great thing about it is, if if you don't know where you need to improve, you won't improve that area. You will automatically think that
That's right.
you've got that area figured out. So this is just a great tool to sort of, peel back the scab, so to speak, and to sort of encapsulate, like he said, to get laser focused about, okay, where do I need to really focus my efforts on? And I can say, after I looked at it and read the assessment, I was looking at this going, okay, if I'm honest with myself, yeah, I do need to work on that. So thank you so much, Ryan, for your time today, for the assessment that you've created, and just for everything that you're doing for the body of Christ and more. Brother, thank you so much for stopping by. Love and appreciate you and everything that you're doing.
Yeah, Robert, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.